Hello, welcome. Welcome to you all listening today. We're so glad to be with you again for the third and final, but not the last word in our conversation on this Women's History Month in the year 2021, where we are talking this time about colleagues need to know. And we know that women know a lot of things about what we think our male colleagues ought to know. And so we're having a conversation today to invite those questions and to offer some wisdom, some solicited and unsolicited advice. This is the third talk in our series. We hope you are watching all of the other videos, some amazing conversations. Our first one about what white women need to know. Our second conversation about what senior leadership needs to know, with conversations among associate leaders, and then today on what male colleagues need to know. We know that we won't cover everything, but what we want to say is that gender inequality, sexism, misogyny continues to divide the body of Christ. If we believe in the Pentecostal vision that the gifts of the Holy Spirit are spread by God upon all of God's creation, those gifts fall upon everyone. And that means women, all women, white women and Black women, queer women and straight women, Indigenous women, women in every corner of every country, in every place, poor, able-bodied and disabled, everywhere, ordained and not, young and old. And yet, the church has not fully embraced all of the gifts given by God to women. And so we take sexism as a church dividing issue today. And it is with great joy that these deeply faithful, deeply wise women join with my colleague, Reverend Kenneth Young, and I in conversation about what our male colleagues need to know. It is my great joy and indeed an honor to get to learn alongside these women. With me today is the Dr. Geralde Gabeau, who is joining us here in Boston. She is the founder and executive director of IFSI USA, a Haitian American institute for new immigrants, and has extensive experience working in public health initiatives, particularly around women and children's health in the US and in Haiti. You all who potentially are outside of the Haitian American community have maybe not the ability to see exactly how much of a force of nature Dr. Gabeau is. She is moving communities and resources in places and spaces that are just remarkable. She has a doctoral degree in strategic foresight from Regent, a master's in public health from BU, another master's in management from Cambridge College, and she is originally from Haiti. Dr. Gabeau, welcome. It's so good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Reverend Laura. It's such a pleasure to join you. And it's always nice to be working side by side with you because we can feel your love, your compassion, and your passion for the work that we do. So it's a pleasure to join you for those conversations. Thank you.
I'm so grateful to be with you, Gerald. And also with us today is Amey Victoria Adkins-Jones, Dr. Amey Victoria Adkins-Jones, who is also blessing us with her presence. She is the Assistant Professor of Theology and African Diaspora Studies at Boston College. She is a specialist in Mariology and Black feminist and womanist thought, praise God, and her first book, Immaculate Misconceptions, is in progress. And it is a theological account of the rise of the global sex trade, certainly something that at this moment is essential for our understanding of globalization and the ways that the church understands sex and sexual purity and the rape of Black flesh. She studies the icon of the Black Madonna, and her second project, See No Evil, is also in progress around technology and visual violence. We are so grateful wonderful to have Professor Amey Victoria Adkins-Jones with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm honored and excited to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you. And you all know my dear wise and trusted colleague and collaborator in ministry. And if I may be so audacious to call him a feminist and womanist colleague and scholar, I'm gonna name it and claim it in the mighty and matchless name of Jesus Christ, because I have watched my colleague Kenneth do things that not all male colleagues do. And so I think it's worth saying, you know, women see when our male colleagues step up. And we notice and we remember. And so I want to publicly make sure I am thanking Reverend Kenneth, and knowing that as I have much to learn about what it means to be a good white ally, Reverend Kenneth has things to learn about what it means to be a good feminist and womanist. But Reverend Kenneth Young is a colleague on staff at the Mass Council of Churches and the senior pastor of Calvary Baptist Church in the city of Haverhill in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Reverend Kenneth.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for allowing me to sit in on this conversation. So I'm gonna just kind of start this off and just ask this question. I'm sure a lot of times, at least from my experience, from what I'm hearing, and a lot of times I'm just gonna be very candid and honest and vulnerable, and say, you know, sometimes as a man, I don't even think about this, because they just address me as they address me. But how would you like for us to address you today? We know that you all have titles and we want to honor all the work that you have done. And so we want to make sure that we honor you. How would you like for us to address you?
I mean, to me, one thing that I always said when I go to places, especially in places where we have males and females, I'd love to be called by Sister Geralde, which is my first name. And to me, being a sister means so much. It's such an encompassing, you know, title where you are called to serve. You are called to minister. You are called to put your God's given talent, in your communities. So Sister Geralde, to me, it's a, you know, deeper, and that shows like a relationship, shows connection. However, I do also know when I use Dr. Gabeau, there is a different connotation. So it all depends on, you know, where you are and who is in front of you, who are you, you know, connecting with, but depending on the platform. So Sister Geralde is good. Dr. Gabeau is also okay.
Thank you, Dr. Gabeau. I'll go with that because I think this platform, we have some male colleagues, and we need, as we say in our culture, they need to put a handle on that name, put some respect on it. So I'm going to say Dr. Gabeau. Reverend Amey?
Okay, so to echo this, you know, I think that it is so important, yes, to realize that naming is a sacred act. And all of the environments where I have been, you know, called upon or mentioned by my first name, or someone, I've even had people ask me, you know, do you know when, like, who the professor is, right? And so these are still realities, or like, oh, do you know who the speaker is? And it's like, actually, I do know her, known her for a long time. Hi, how you doing? And so because so many of our imaginations have been eclipsed by heteronormativity, by whiteness, but also by notions of patriarchy in so many ways, in so many professional environments. So when I am on campus, our nomenclature is usually professor. I am Professor Adkins-Jones or Dr. Adkins-Jones. Around colleagues, I am doctor, unless we know each other, unless we are behind closed doors. And that has less to do with me. I like to be called Amey Victoria. I like to be called what my mama and them named me. But it for me, I've realized that even when I feel comfortable, if I don't know who's watching, And I don't know who's looking, and I don't know who is learning. And so in our church congregation, I'm referred to as Dr. Amey. Okay. And I really appreciate that, because I think it's important to demonstrate and to note, one, that I do have a long list of credentials that would never be a question in terms of how we would refer to someone who is male embodied or male identified. But also because we are still breaking down doors and windows and obstacles, barriers to access. So I need young little girls and little boys to recognize that this is what a pastor can look like, this is what a professor can look like, this is what a theologian can look like. And so naming is one of the ways we bear witness to that. It also, my degrees were also very expensive and very, very long earned. So, we gotta do something every now and again around here. But for the purposes of today, you're welcome to call me Dr. Amey, Dr. Adkins-Jones. But when you see me on the street, Amey Victoria is fine.
Thank you, Dr. Adkins-Jones. But I really appreciate both giving the comments that you have given so far. I think this is a good place to start. So as a male, a lot of times we walk into the room, and this is, of course, I'm painting with a broad stroke, and there are assumptions that we have. We assume that you're going to show us respect because we've done the work. We assume that there are going to be doors that's going to be open for us because we've seen it happen before. Like that whole sense of what has been named and what has been done before us, we have those type of expectations. Very recently, I was having a conversation about sexism in the pulpit. And one of the things that I guess blew my mind was that the sense of my expectations when I get there. So the hoops, and this I'm kind of quoting from what the speakers were saying, that we go through mental hoops of, or we go through mental barriers, or we doing mental exercises. What do I expect? Am I dressed the right way? Are they're gonna respect me for who I am, or are they gonna have a different type of expectations of me because I am a woman? I don't think about that. I put my suit on if it's proper for me to wear a suit. And even if I don't, let's say I got on jeans and a t-shirt, I still have expectations that you're gonna dress me the right way, because that's the way the world has worked. And so I want you all, if you don't mind, to kind of educate us on that, of what you actually have to go through, because I don't think we think about that. As I said, we put on our clothes and we go, we get in the car. What I'm probably thinking about, if it's a speaking engagement, if it's me going to preach somewhere, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say. I'm thinking about the crowd. I'm thinking about the congregation. I'm thinking about the atmosphere that I'm going to be in. I'm not thinking about, did I wear the right color? Is it fitting the right way? How if it's a male colleague that I'm going to run into, are they going to address me in the right manner? So can you at least talk to us about— Are
your earrings too distracting?
Oh, okay, that too. Can you just kind of talk to us about, the sense of what you have to go through just to get ready for any type of engagement?
For me, one thing that when we're talking about males, again, there are many subsets, right? You have male in general, you have the male in leadership, you have the white male, you have also the spiritual aspect of being a male. So which really place a male in general, okay, in this big category of being very privileged, not to be thinking about anything, not to be thinking about appearance, not to be thinking about what I content, what I have to say. Just being a male in our society is a privilege. Being a white male is another higher up a privilege. But the fact that they don't even have to think about what to wear, what to say, how to say it, and things like that, it's it's a big thing that really put us female in a very difficult and delicate situation. And I made a huge mistake, if I could not call that a huge mistake, of, developing programs for church leaders, for pastors. And one of my big, area of study is leading the church to the future. What does it mean for, Christian leaders to be thinking about the church in the next 10 or 15 years? Mm-hmm. So basically all my work, has to do with educating, leaders, Christian leaders, about what it means for them to be thinking about the future for the church. So you can imagine that my work has to do with inviting pastors, church leaders, to come to my workshop so that we can do this work. So to me, it's thinking about, okay, who is going to welcoming me because I am a female, a female leader, a Christian female leader. And, even if when they welcome me, how do I present myself so that this, this welcome kind of, privilege that they give me, I do not mess it up. So it's always this constant battle in terms of, how do I maintain whatever, window that they open to me so that I can go to the next level. And it is it's a constant battle to me, just to make it through the door of a male kind of, environment. And as you know, especially when you talk about the Christian leadership, it's probably now 90% male versus 10% female. So it is a constant battle for you to fit in, and to fit in a way that is not, it's like you have to walk those fine lines so that you don't disturb, the protocol that has been established, over centuries. So it is a real it's a real battle for me. So I don't know, Dr. Amey, how do you see about that? But for me, every day I have to think about, how am I going to approach? How am I going to speak? How am I going to present myself? It's a real thing for me.
I absolutely agree all the time. I just had, my spouse is a senior pastor and also a professor, which that's a whole other set of conversations. But we just had this conversation. We were asked to do something together. And I was articulating that, well, did you ask about this, and this? And he was kind of like, what? And I was like, oh, wow, you don't realize that I had to ask an entirely other set of questions. Even when I'm asked, right? I assume you asked me to come do something. So I assume you know what you're going to get. You're going to get this hair and these earrings and this red lipstick. I feel like it that day. This is what's coming. Like, you should know there's other YouTube videos, you can figure it out. So let's not act surprised. But still, questions about, all right, so what exactly is the program? Who else is going to be there? Is it Mother's Day? Is it Women's Day? Is it Women's History Month? Is this why I'm being asked? What are the politics of the church? Who is on staff? Where are the other women? What are they doing? Was I asked by a woman? Was I asked by a man? What is this serving for? Okay, let me look on TV to see, well, how many people have been in the pulpit? What is being said? What is the politic? And then, yes, because you don't want to be distracting from the word. Even if I think that the distractions are ridiculous and sexist and misogynistic, I also feel deeply called and passionate about what I'm doing, especially in a pulpit. So I'm pretty sure that my, spouse has never, I'm not trying to, obviously I love him very much. Has never had to think about what he wears, but I almost always wear a robe because I don't want to hear about it. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in an environment that, one, did not openly ordain or support women in ministry. So I had to go through all of those battles by the time I got to seminary. I got to seminary and had folks saying, hey, you're going to get ordained. And I was like, oh, well, I'm finally okay with women in ministry, but not me, because it takes so much to process that kind of formation, even when you are wrestling with the call. But yes, I've come to a point now in my life, but I was told you need to pull your hair back. You can't wear jewelry. You can't wear certain kinds of makeup. You definitely can't wear pants. These are, but this is how I was formed, even in seminary. And my seminary experience is not that far removed. And I oftentimes had women who were instructed to tell me about this. You know, we are very familiar, particularly I know in Baptist and Free Church, you know, with what I call the holy napkin. You're sitting in the pulpit and someone brings you a scarf to cover, you know, but have we interrogated what exactly this is supposed to mean? Are my knees that much a threat to your sanctity? I need to know. But these things that have been habituated that we don't ask questions about absolutely change. I can remember so many times being on a roster in a pulpit, and you know, we don't always have everybody sit in the pulpit anymore. Too many people are, you know, but I remember being much younger and being shocked by so much crosstalk that was happening. And if you've been in a pulpit, you know that. And I felt so excluded, so paralyzed, because it was such a male sort of infused bravado space. And yes, I'm using these analytics of male and men, you know, as Dr. Gabeau has said, like very, very broadly, but just things that it was clear to me. I mean, my most charitable things you just never had to think about. And even when I was told things that now are sort of disciplinary and things that I would absolutely resist about my body and what it looked like and what I put on it in order to not be a distraction, I was only being told that so that I would not be barred from further opportunities. I don't think that, you know, the women elders who were policing me really actually cared, but they were like, we want to see you grow. We want to see your gifts make room. And this is a really ridiculous thing to lose those opportunities on. But those are still machinations that we have to think about of how can I embody ministerially? And this happens, you know, collegially as well, in multiple spaces, but particularly in our church spaces, there are so many invisible obstacles to pass through. And if we don't make space to discuss them, if we don't make space to name them, if we don't make space to say, wait a minute, this isn't holy, this is demonic. If we don't take seriously that our churches are not inherently safe spaces for everyone. And just because you come in with a title or a credential or a call does not mean that I walk in and I feel safe, or I walk in and I recognize that. And so if I don't, then we know that folks in the pews don't necessarily do that. And not everyone is called to take that risk even into certain kinds of spaces, right? Like not everyone should have to, but I think that we have to be honest with ourselves that there are from even from the point of the parking lot, that there are so many invisible walls and so many messages that we are articulating. And so we have to figure out ways to listen and interrogate and ask questions about our privilege and what messages that we are sending and making available. And also what messages are not being heard. Silence is presence, and silence speaks. You know, silence is not, sometimes it's consent, and sometimes it is defiance and resistance to what God is trying to do.
Yes, it is. And I appreciate you saying, I want to come back to you because we've talked about feminist and womanness, and those are two different things, Dr. Adkins-Jones. And how does that womanness and feminist play out in these environments? You talked about, you know, things happen, not feeling safe. I don't think about, like, I'm just being honest, I don't think of nobody trying to holler at me in the parking lot. Now, I went to a mega church when I was in college, loved it, had a great experience. But I do know from my female friends and sisters who were like, listen, you know, when I get outside this church, you know, some of the, you know, the parking lot people might be trying to get at me, you know, and I don't think about those things. But how does that kind of feminist, womanist approach to church in particular in this setting, how is it articulated? How does it play out? If it's very male driven, even though women are really doing the work in a lot of our churches across denominational lines, how do we we see that? And then how do we, as men, how do we not be afraid of it? I think that's a good question, right? Yes, you may be a feminist, you may be a womanist, but you still love us. We need to love you. Like, it shouldn't be contention. And sometimes I think in some of those settings, it's contention, and sometimes it's a thick atmosphere, and sometimes, you know, people are being pushed away because of that.
Yeah, those were a lot of questions.
I know, sorry.
So let me track on a couple of things. I do not have a statistic on this. My co-sister on the panel, I have yet to be in a women in ministry space and meet someone who was woman identified, who has not been approached inappropriately, even while ministering. And like some like hit on, flirted with, commentary on one's body, commentary on what you're wearing. I mean, I've been followed to my car. And I have,
as an escort, or as in like, I'm trying to get,
as a self-appointed escort.
Wow. Okay.
Where you come from? I'm sorry. Like something aside conversation and then inching along.
Yeah, I just haven't had those experiences where I've seen like, yeah. And if I did, I would be like, hey, can you back up? You know?
And I think this is where we need our male colleagues to get more curious.
Exactly. And I think, and I think that's where the question lies, in terms of, things that you have never thought about, but that are our day-to-day of, us as women, day-to-day type of experience, day-to-day, thinking, because we have to be thinking about those things. It's like, am I going to be safe in this place? Am I going to be safe to just walk in and talk? Is it safe for me to share what I feel? And how much of my passion can I share? Because remember, the minute as we as women, we start to kind of share something passionately, we become the angry women. When the men can share, as much as they want, however they want, guess what? They are wise. It's their wisdom that is pushing them to talk the way that they talk. So in a way, the privilege that is associated with being a male in our communities versus a woman who has to not only think about, the content of what I'm going to say, have to do research over research. It's like we have to come 10 times better prepared to make sure that we are heard. When a male can just come, not even have to write any note, just come and say whatever, and then the male is welcome, and then people pay attention. But for us, we have to have our data always. It's like, where is it coming from? We have to back up everything. So the amount of research, the amount of prep work that we have to do on top of being aware of our surrounding. How are we being seen by others? How are we being heard by others? All of that. So it's this added burden that we have to face every day, that, as you said, Reverend Kenneth, that you never thought about them. And that's one of the reasons why I think men needs to pay attention to what exactly is going through a woman, head experience for them to be there, so that by the time that you come, at least you start thinking about, oh, wow, you come here at 10, but I have been here since 8, because I have to spend those extra 2 hours to be thinking about all of those things. So, so those are the things that I think that are so important for male to understand, especially in ministry, in terms of, our role, our acceptance, and, maintaining. It's like, as Dr. Amey said, it's like, when you give me that space, I have to work 10 times harder to maintain that space, to keep it, so that you don't tell me next time, no, you are not welcome here anymore. So much for us to be thinking about, so that we can really make it through the world of male.
Wow.
Yes.
So I want to go back to that whole, like, you go into the car and you got the self-escorted person who's following you to the car.
I would say this. So, a lot of people, very like, will bring somebody with them, have armor bearers.
Right.
My spouse, for instance, if he's preaching somewhere he never has to think about, and this is seen as like inappropriate. He never has to think about, he never asks like, what's an honorary, right? Okay, and that's fine, except that I've preached Easter Sunday and was, for someone else and didn't do that. Well, and I mean, just a lot of work, like took myself, brought people, whatever else, and was not compensated. And so obviously we don't do this work for compensation, but I also am not Paul and build tents. Like, what do you mean? I've just never heard that from someone else, right? So like the things that kind of go through your mind, because like I have a family, I have bills, I put in a lot of work. And so the ways that, I don't do it for money, but the ways that is a sign of deep disrespect, that's not valuing my labor. My spouse, I mean, this is one of the things that we talk about. He gets in the car, goes wherever by himself, drives himself. And I'm always like, you're not going to even take somebody with you. I don't have the freedom to do that. If I'm going somewhere, and especially like if I don't know you, we don't already have rapport and relationship, I can't go by myself. Changing clothes. Where do you change clothes? And where do I change to the robe? Is it a male pastor's, bathroom space or changing space? Are we there alone? Are we not? Where are you going to, right? Just things that no one else has to necessarily, you don't have to think about if you aren't differently about, like where spaces are happening, where are we meeting, where are we able to talk? And that's not because people are, I assume anything sinister about anyone, but I also have not done that and have ended up in terrible positions. And that has been a terrible position, not only in terms of, maybe someone congregationally, but I've also been in not great positions with people who were clergy. And that's not something that we always want to talk about, but just because, you have these letters, like I would be naive as a Black woman in this world to make assumptions about people if I do not know. And so that's, who is this person? Do you know who this person is, et cetera, et cetera. Those are very real, unfortunate realities of sexism, misogyny, misogynoir. Now you asked me about feminist thought and womanist thought. And womanist thought comes, it sort of evolves from Black liberation theology, but it also evolves, much like Black feminism and womanist thought outside of theology, from a feminist stance that assumed that all women were the same. And that we were all sort of experiencing something like suffrage, right? Like, oh, the women's right to vote. Well, wait a minute, like Black people can't vote at all. It doesn't matter, so, but then, Black liberation struggle, being so much about Black male uplift. And then in so many Black churches, right? Some of the problems and the residuals of the charismatic male preacher, cisgendered, heteronormative, usually embodied in these ways, and the places of exclusion that come from that. And so one of the tenets of womanism, it's derived from Alice Walker, but takes on certain aspects of its own life, is a commitment to community. That it sort of follows and we sort of follow the Combahee River Collective. That if Black women were to free, everybody else would have to be free too. And so many times I think that the fear that you mentioned comes from a misunderstanding. Because people don't read women who write, and people don't cite women, and people, have misconceptions, and I say like the Fox News headlines of what feminism is or Black feminism is, right? Like the notions, as Dr. Gabeau said, of, well, these are just people who are angry, or these are just folks who are separatists. But this is really about calling us, one another, cis, trans, different backgrounds, like as to seeing each other as whole and to seeing the flourishing of all people. And one of the sort of so many of those who heralded womanist theology, it started with listening differently. One of the paramount stories that comes from Sisters in the Wilderness, but that constantly is referenced, is the relationship between Sarah and Hagar. And not only noting the differences between how Sarah is treated and how Hagar is treated, but taking seriously that God speaks and and that Hagar names God, and that God is present even in the midst of our wildernesses. But also, can we stop acting as if the holiness, the aspects of holiness that we attribute to Abraham or Isaac or Jacob, and certainly David, as if we can have no critiques, as if we cannot say and see how even within our scripture, even within the histories of our church, how male identity has been used to divide us and to encourage and maintain systems of oppression. How can we do that? And if we can see that happening in the Bible, then why can't we resist? And so much of that is about retelling and renaming and listening to one another in new ways. And I would say, Reverend Ken, so much of that is about interrogating your fear. What exactly are you afraid of, especially if you see so many sisters who have been living and pushing and ministering in spite of our fear, in spite of so many very tangible things to be fearful of. If we've been pushing, then like fear is just, if that comes with the territory, I need you to take that risk, because that is, and it's not different from aspects of anti-racist work or aspects of other work that we're willing to do. You have to be willing to go to some uncomfortable places if we want to grow together. Because we can grow apart, but growth doesn't happen by maintaining the positions of privilege, particularly if they're oppressive where you are. And so, I get asked like, well, who do I read? Well, start reading women. and who do I talk to? And it's like, well, you don't need to talk to me. I'm not in your, you could talk to me, but the best place to talk to your spouse. Talk to your children, talk to those in leadership in your church. Ask them how they see you. Ask if your pulpit is open to women. Ask if the diaconate is open to women. Ask if women in those positions are supported. Ask if they're only associates. Who do you put up? When you get a job recommendation, who do you ask? Sorry, I could go on.
I know, yeah. They don't even have to ask. They just can look around themselves and see exactly, in the church, look at the different positions that we have in the church. And then who are those people? So,
Right.
when you meet, let's say, think about the elders, the board of elders, who are part of the board of elders in the church. So if you are honest with yourself and you really want to know, you want to understand, just take a look at your own specific church, and then look around and see. I am unfortunately part of a different local churches where if you are talking about the board of elders, that women are not allowed to be part of that, basically because basically we don't have the wisdom to be part of the board of elders. And when you're talking about fear, I don't think it's just fear, it's also the let go of the privileges. So because they believe that if women start to really take on some of those leadership positions, it means that probably, we would have to let go of some, of their titles, of their privileges. So it's not so much fear in terms of, us, but it's also the fear of losing, the opportunities that come with all of the privilege that you have. Because the privilege do not come for absolutely nothing. There are benefits associated with that too. So in a way, thinking about all the benefits, thinking about, the prestige, that comes with all of that. So it's good for me to be, a man, because of all of those things that come to that with that. So I think at least if people want to be honest, they just can, take a quick look, look at your board of directors, look at your board of elders, look at who is preaching every Sunday, look at all of those, and then you will see whether or not something needs to change.
And I think
go ahead. I think this is I think it's a parallel question, as Dr. Amey has said, to some of the self-assessment that I deeply appreciate colleagues and friends have asked me to do, in the sort of, You say you want an anti-racist commitment. Let's own it in your friendships, in your reading list, in your podcasts, in your media consumption, in who you're buying from. Where is your money, your attention, your artistry? And so what I expect of my male colleagues is that internal assessment. What is my language like? And I think this is where we get to some practical steps that I've watched male colleagues move towards. So I think about commitments like Jeremy Burton at Jewish Community Relations Council, who has made a core commitment that he will not speak on a panel that is all men. Now, if you want him on that panel, you can have him, but you're going to have to change around who else is on that panel. Male colleagues can do that. You can say, I will not preach your Good Friday service if it's all men, and here 4 other women, right? Like, if you want me, we can do that. There are, you can notice if you have women on your board of deacons, one of the spaces that I think women are often symbolically included, but not actually included, is around speech. You can be at the table, but not be on the agenda. Who's actually getting the speaking time? And so maybe it's worth assigning a timekeeper for that board meeting. I've been in boards that have done that to notice, are only the white people speaking? Are only the men speaking? And then do an internal self-assessment and say, gosh, we have a 60-40 board, but it turned out that 90% of the men were speaking. And I think the sort of realistic assessment that National Congregational Study came out for 2019, 13.5% of congregations in the US are led by women. That's 30% in white liberal congregations, 16.2 in Black, and 2.4 in white conservative. 30%. So while you may know a bunch of clergy women, and that's not the only place where leadership exists, I think it's worth saying there are a number of women with academic degrees because they cannot lead in other spaces in the church, who love Jesus a whole lot. And if things were different, could be in leadership in other spaces with ecclesial leadership, but because they're blocked in certain ways. And that's, as Dr. Amey has said, noticing the silence. But I know that every single time I show up and wear a collar and have the audacity to say, I am arriving here as a minister of the gospel to preach and proclaim, I am the embodiment of a point of contention. And that's not just because I'm married to a woman, and the church has been very clear that I am a church dividing issue. That's something in and of itself, but the audacity to come as a woman who is in open defiance of scripture and will come and preach the gospel, and still somebody's going to meet me at the door and say, can I help you? Like, y'all are the ones who invited me. And yet still I can preside at a wedding, and some older man's going to put his hand on my rear. And so we can talk about the worst case scenario of the sexism and the control. And like, that extreme example is one thing, but what I expect of my male colleagues is the self-awareness of, what am I going to do to make this better? Not just because, I'm a good progressive or I'm a girl dad or what, but because I believe theologically that you are gifted by God, full dignity, and my liberation is bound up in this.
Absolutely. I've been having this conversation around children's books and how, noticing in children's curriculum, like so many implicit things being taught or not taught. But one of those things that I had a discussion with some of my other colleagues who have children about is like, you know what? I love Black representation, and I have a 1-year-old daughter, a pandemic baby. I was like, you know what? I really appreciate, like, hair is a huge cultural issue. in the Black diaspora community, right? And the ways that our hair has been rejected and denied, and what it means, long and straight and blonde is what's beautiful, right? All of these different things that do so much harm to young Black, brown, girls, particularly in the United States, and the way that our beauty culture is shaped. And so I appreciate so many hair books for our children. We got a book about the bonnet. We got a book about hair. We got a book about this. We got a book about that. Everybody has given me, I've been gifted so many hair books. But what does it mean for just a book about anything else in life to feature Black children? For it to not only be the specific, like, let me address this issue, which is important, but can we just have, can my child see Black representation in a book about fall, or in a book about walking a dog, or in a book about going to get ice cream, right? And so it's sometimes when we are thinking about work around identities or specific issues, sometimes we think that it's only, it's Women's Day, so that's gonna be my Women's Day speaker. But what about ordinary time? And I think that is important in terms of when I think, or if people ask me, what are some things I can do? I would say, think about the ordinary time. It is not women's job to come in and teach all of the men about what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing, or this is what I'm going to preach from, or you're going to hear about women in scripture because you invited me to come and speak on that, right? Like that these are special issues. No, you have to be, if you are called to lead in whatever way, and you take that seriously, then you have to be doing the work. You have to be in partnerships, and then you have to be teaching and preaching about these kinds of issues as you form your congregation and as you participate in the spiritual formation of others. Because where it comes out is not just what happens in a moment on Sunday morning, but it's how are we treating people? How are we taking seriously people at the grocery store, and then on our jobs, and then in our schools, as our classmates, and all of these other spaces where sexism continues to be ridiculously prominent. And so if we don't get it in church, and certainly if we see the opposite, if we are getting these messages in church, and we continue to maintain the premises, spoken or unspoken, that God has a certain hierarchy of value, and it has a certain hierarchy of leadership, and you have to, that this is how we honor God, by me, as Dr. Gabeau said, not giving up all of these things that are actually great about my life. Favor ain't fair. If that's really what our theology is about how our bodies are designed and how our genders are read and interpreted, we have so many problems. And so I really think that there has to be an issue, but something that is very near and dear to my heart. I'm a Black theologian, and I am rare. I'm a Black woman theologian, and I am super rare. I identify as a Black queer theologian, woman, and who is woman identified, and that is super rare. And part of the problem is that people do not think about the supply chain. What children are being called upon and remarked on for their gifts? Who do we imagine? Who are we encouraging in the church? Part of my call story is that when I was a very young girl, I had never seen a woman in a pulpit. Like women didn't walk in the pulpit, right? The pulpit is up. You walk across. You speak from the podium. Okay. I love my church, and I love our people. I just grew up in a small town. Much has changed. Some things happen, but they won't see this. It's not Massachusetts. Okay. So, but I remember telling people I want to be a minister and a lawyer. I didn't know any ministers who were women, and I really didn't know any lawyers either, just like in general, like the one town lawyer. And I remember hearing a revivalist preach about how a woman's place was never in the pulpit. And that shaped me. And so my mother, being who she was, was like, if you have questions, go talk to him, go ask him about it. And I remember there was a pink sticky note. He wrote these little Bible verses for me, stuck it on my children's Bible. And I have a very strong image in my mind of going home and ripping up that hot pink sticky note but that still deeply affecting and shaping me. And I see it now because if you want people to go to seminary and you want people to have opportunities and you want to see, a lot of times people say, well, there's nobody qualified. One, you need to expand your network. It's not true. But two, well, who are you raising up? What messages are you giving young women and girls about who they can be and how they can imagine themselves too in our various spaces and in our communities? Do they know that they can start a business and serve the community in all these powerful ways? Well, yes, they do, because Dr. Gabeau is there. Like, do you know? But if you don't know, and if you don't see, and if you have not heard, sometimes those things take a long time. So I always say to look at who's coming behind you. Who are you giving opportunities to? Who are you funding? Who are you giving financial support to? Where is that happening? But also, how are you doing work that allows you to be challenged and changed? Because there is truth that, yes, I can say things about women and women's experience and empowerment, but honestly, to take seriously that there are going to be people who hear very differently a message about what it means to support women in ministry from me than they're going to hear it from Reverend King. And so it takes a village. We have to be in relationship and true community together. If this is something that we see as an obstacle to our fullest participation and embodiment of being the hands and feet of Christ.
And also, as we are talking about the future of the church, one thing that is so critical for us to understand is that, leaders, male leaders, ought to pay attention to what's going on right now around our young girls who are now, very well educated, and we would not take what I used to take as, a young, female leader going up. Because, the way that we were raised, especially in my community, I don't know exactly how it is for you, Amey, but for me, showing respect, not having to question too much. Even when you have questions, you had to hold them because you didn't want to be shown as disrespectful or not following, God's principle. But guess what? Our young girls right now, our young women are not the same generation. And they are not going to just accept because you said so. You will have to explain, you will have to support. So thinking about the future, and that's the reason why my line of work is both passionate but also sad. Passionate because in terms of, seeing what we could be doing in terms of preparing for the next, 20 years, but sad seeing that people are not paying attention. Church leaders are not paying attention to what's coming their way. So when you are not treating your young girls, your young women, you're not treating them well, you are not valuing them, you are not putting their talent, their God's given talent into, good use because you feel that you are the one. It's like everything has to come to you. And then, so you are basically stopping, the spread of the gospel, because those are the ones who are going to carry the baton. And if they are not valued, if they are not accepted, and then you think that you are going to go and then do business as usual, before you know it, you are 60, you are 70, you are gone. So who is going to replace you? So think about all of those things in the context of building the church for the future. Because when we're talking about, go and, spread the gospel, remember, it's today that you are making plan for the next 10 years or 20 years. It depends on how you treat your assets, your God-given talents that you have around you. And we know studies show that, women tend to go to higher education, like, probably 2 or 3 times more than male right now. That's the reality. So what are you doing with all of those gifts? You want them to just leave the church, go somewhere else and not being involved? And how are you going to secure the future of the church? So those are the things that when you think about it, it brings sadness to your heart, knowing that we are facing a great danger. We are facing the danger of church slowly disappearing because, the church leadership composed mostly of males do not pay attention to those resources, those talents they have around them.
Church, you have heard a word. We do not squander the gifts of God. We do not. That is a sin. And Dr. Gabeau and Dr. Amey and I are available for your Sundays, your Mondays, your Tuesdays, your Wednesday night Bible studies, and all the days that are not your Women's Month celebration. As is Dr. Kenneth, for Sundays other than Martin Luther King Sunday. Did I get that right?
And Black History Month.
And Black History Month.
Any other time you want to talk about race.
And as it turns out, Reverend Kenneth thinks about things other than racism. Right? But we don't squander the gifts of God, church, right? Like you hear not just, even if this just doesn't speak to your heart, you hear Dr. Gabeau saying, like, this is strategically wise. We don't squander the gifts of God. Oh, church, I am so profoundly grateful. We are so profoundly grateful that you have spent this time with us, with Reverend Dr. Amey Victoria Adkins-Jones of Boston College. Such a joy to be with you, to have you among us. We are going to drop links for books and projects that you all are free to share and follow up with her website. We are deeply grateful to have you with us. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Always a joy.
Yeah.
I was like, just let me, you said be honest. So.
And it has been a gift. And with us here, also in Boston, Sister Geralde, Dr. Gabeau, with the Immigrant Family Services Institute here in Mattapan, a dear sister in Christ, an incredible colleague who's available for your leadership seminars if you want the church to continue to spread the gospel. Incredibly grateful to you this day as well too. Thank you, Sister Geralde. And Reverend Kenneth, any closing thoughts? Did you learn everything that male colleagues need to know today?
It was like drinking from a fire hydrant.
Well, we served the one.
I have so many questions. So many more questions.
Good thing you heard a word that we don't just do this once or on one Sunday, but our liberation is bound in one another. Church, thank you. Incredibly grateful. There are more stories, more webinars to include. We'll keep coming back. We hope that you have found this conversation productive and helpful. If this is a ministry that continues to speak to you, if this is a vision of a church that has honest conversations and seeks our mutual liberation, we invite you to continue to contribute and be a part of the Mass Council of Churches. Find us online at masscouncilofchurches.org. Make your contribution, your tithe, your goodwill and free will offering on our donation page. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.